part 2 of Estate Plan 101. As I promised from the first segment, part 1, kind of took you through the Scrooge, the future ghosts, and so forth. Now we're going to talk a little bit more about preservation first, and then we're going to talk about estate, go a little bit more in depth about estate planning and the things that avoid probate and the things that you're going to that's actually going to go through probate while you're trying to think through what type of estate plan makes the most sense for you. So with that being said, let's talk a little bit about asset spin down. Because if you think about it for a moment, what you do here in preservation will determine how much you leave behind to your children or to whoever you're going to leave this money to. Now, sometimes the reason I bring that up, because I know my dad wants to leave everything he can, but not at the expense of his own retirement. So a lot of times I see that people leave money on the table in this mode here that could actually benefit them and even their children while they're alive, and preserve at the same time, then also they can give them their assets as they pass. So the goal is to ultimately preserve. How do you do that? Well, accidental asset spin down is based on a formula, because if you have your IRAs, ultimately you probably move a 401k or 403b into an IRA. And IRA, the purpose of those is to use them for income. That's it. They're not really made for lump sum purchases because you have to pay additional taxes on that money. Then, to me, it's an unnecessary tax. But when you go into retirement, you want to get the maximum income, the more mileage out of your money. How do you do that in order to keep from spending your assets? Well, we're going to use $1 million IRA or 401k in this scenario. This is currently what we see. 99% of the portfolios that come in here. 99% of the portfolios, typically, I and G is how most people accumulated wealth over here, the accumulation mode we were talking about earlier. Because it didn't really matter where you got your return as long as you got a return on your money. You were contributing, your employer was facilitating this growth till you reached $1 million and so forth. So, and what causes accumulation is you're buying shares. You're buying shares at different various prices, okay? And then voila, you wake up one day, you're 65 years old. That's who wants to be a millionaire? Now you're a millionaire. You want to start spending your money. Question is how much income you get from it is extremely important, and how much of it is coming from income and how much of it is coming from your own accumulated shares. And that's where we find the danger. Because in this case here, on what we see is if somebody needs 5% of the portfolio or $50,000, they need income. 5% of $1 million is $50,000. The majority of the time, most people come in here, they got most of their portfolio in growth, and that was good. But when they transition to retirement, they want to know how to preserve their wealth while they're alive. And again, we're going into Estate Plan 101, and the purpose of distributing assets is to be able to pass as much as you can, but not at the expense of your retirement. So if you got $10,000 in interest and dividends, because those are paid to you, by the way, regardless of what the markets do. Think about it. Retirement's all about getting reliable income, because growth is unreliable, right? Capital appreciation comes. Sometimes it does, and sometimes it does not. And what I have noticed since the pandemic from 2020 till now, the markets are very sporadic. They shoot up and then they come back down. And most people are kind of concerned, when should I really retire? And there's really good reason. Well, if you get into the weeds here a little bit, you have to pardon me for that. If you're getting $10,000 because you got a $50,000 to go, where's the other $40,000 going to come from? The $40,000 is going to come from principal. It's going to come out of principal. Now, let me describe to you what I mean by principal. What happens when you accumulate wealth, you were buying shares. Now you're going into retirement, and now if you need $40,000 because you're deficient here, you're going to have to sell shares to come up with the difference. If you get growth, you sell less shares. If you don't get growth or if you're stagnant, you sell the same amount of shares. If it goes down, you can sell as much as twice as much as shares. Because that happened in the bottom of the market in 2009. It happened again in 2002, 2003 when the market went down 50 and 60% between those two debacles. So you got to keep in mind, this is where asset erosion happens right here. And if you're constantly doing this, think about this for a moment. This is permanent. You're always going to take $40,000 if you need $50,000 out of your retirement plan because you're hoping to grow money back. And I'm not negating growth. I'm not ignoring growth. But it's hard to do that if you're doing nothing but selling shares, because every time you sell shares, you give up that amount of money is not going to be able to grow anymore because you just spent it. You spent it for the purpose of income. And so that's what we mean by asset spin down. Over time, this becomes a problem. So with that being said, let's talk about unnecessary leakage when it comes to things you want to avoid at death. Oh, in order to do that, there's things that you can avoid right now while you're trying to figure out what type of estate plan you want. You can avoid unnecessary attorney fees, not the attorney fees it costs to get your estate plan. Now, that's what you're trying to figure out now. Then you got your probate fees, your unnecessary probate fees more than likely, and estate tax if you're over the threshold, and then you've got income tax. That's your assets that you leave behind that are income taxable. And so what most people want to know is what will avoid probate and what will not avoid probate. Okay? Probate basically just means that the court is going to have to prove everything you leave behind if you have a will. So if you have a will, it's going to go through probate. Okay? There's no way around it. If you don't have a will, it's going to go through probate, regardless. That's not a bad thing. I know people that's had probate, that's went through probate. My grandparents went through probate, but the amount of assets they had back then wasn't as near as like it is what I'm running across today. So sometimes that what may have made sense for them may not make sense for you, because probate cost is something that the court charges, and not only that, you've got other concerns. You've got people that can come contest it. You remember in part one, I talked about the scenario where the trust was left behind to the wife, and she was in charge of the trust. If she had had a will, then she may have been contested, and there could have been unnecessary attorney fees, because that means all 5 children may have their own representation, all 5 of them. So the trust avoided that. And then also unnecessary probate fees because it's in the trust. So a trust can avoid probate. Okay? And the most common trust that most people use, is I'm going to abbreviate, it's called revocable. Most common one used today. Reason why? Because you want to have control of your assets. And then whatever is left, then you leave that at the second death if you're married, first death if you're single, and then it becomes irrevocable, and then now the trustee takes over just like it did with the lady that I was sharing with you earlier. So you've got will that avoids probate, or will that does not avoid probate, and then trust that avoids probate. What other items will go through probate? Your home. That's extremely important, right? Because most people, if you leave your home to your kids in a will, distribute it, and they got 3 children, they're all just probably going to sell a home, right? So it's going to go through probate. Second home. Rental property. Now keep in mind, this is just on the surface here. People do estate planning. If they don't want none of this, they go through probate, then they're going to have to come over here to this to avoid it. So, and the list can go on. Personal stuff, it could be, you could have antique cars. I've seen where you've had two sons. One son, I know a gentleman right now has got this antique vehicle. It's worth about $70,000. Only one of the sons are going to get it, not both. So I told the father, you're going to have a conversation with them and share with them who's going to get it and who's not, because they're not really going to argue with the father. Or force the sale of it, whichever one. So you got personal, you got jewelry. Jewelry is very personal. So if you have more than $2, for example, got to bring that up. $2 can actually argue on who's going to get mama's wedding ring, or maybe special jewelry and so forth. So sometimes all of these things right here are going to go through probate unless you point these in some way to the trust and to just the traditional revocable trust. Now, if you have rental properties, most people have LLCs, which is smart. You have an LLC, you point the LLC to the trust, because the LLC is the one that's managing the rental property and so forth. So all of these are going to go through probate. There's probably other things. But here are some items that are going to avoid probate. You have IRAs. You got 401ks. And I say 401k, I'm talking about any employer plan, 457, TSPs, 403Bs, and so forth. You got TOD accounts. Now, TOD accounts is like a CD, for example. You can get paperwork that's what they call POD, payable on death, or TOD, transfer on death, means it bypasses probate, goes directly to who you want to give the money to. And you got IRAs, 401ks, you have annuities, and you have life insurance. All of these are beneficiary driven. Okay? Beneficiary driven means as long as you have a human being, a beneficiary, and sometimes people will point different assets to the trust, but it doesn't matter. These is what avoids probate. And so what most people do is they want to make sure they get the beneficiary set up correctly. Beneficiary is extremely important. Why? Because, what we find as a financial advisor, financial planner, is we're working with people day in and day out that are in retirement. And every once in a while, a spouse will pass, or sometimes one of their children will pass. That means they're going to have to make some changes to their beneficiaries. And so knowing the beneficiaries and making sure those get reset up are extremely important. So that way, all of these right here will stay and avoid probate. And you do that behind a financial planning firm that helps you to stay on top of that. And that's what we do for our clients. Again, the goal is here is to be able to get all these things that are pointed to a trust to some degree. And by the way, there's other different trusts. There's irrevocable trust, Medicaid qualified trust. The list goes on, and that's where you get it more extensive planning with the attorney and so forth. But to get a good, solid estate plan today, just for the basics, are extremely important. And so most people, whenever they get a plan, they're either going to get a will, and then they're going to get a durable power of attorney, and I'm abbreviating here because I'm running out of room here. They get healthcare power of attorney. By the way, this all comes along with a package. This is a package deal here. And then you got the trust over here, the same thing. This comes like a package, kind of like buying a car if you had sunroof and so forth. And then you got healthcare directives and living wills. Again, excuse me for abbreviating here, but these come along. Why? Why is that? Because a durable power of attorney is a financial decisions that you may need help in while you're alive, and also healthcare power of attorney if you don't feel comfortable about making decisions on your medications and so forth. A lot of times we see moms, including my mother. We have nurse practitioners and nurses in our family. So a healthcare power of attorney, sometimes they'll point them to help them make decisions as they get older. Living will and healthcare directive kind of work hand in hand. Living will is if you're in coma and you're never going to come to, maybe you don't want to stay in the hospital and because hospitals charge, right? So there's going to be cost to your estate by doing that. You may say, no, I want you to go ahead and pull the plug, so you appoint an advance directive to be able to do that. So those are what those documents are for. And it's the same is true with the trust. If you're wanting to, here, this package, you avoid probate, and if you do it right, over here, you're going to go through probate, but at least it is a good estate plan. And so today, our clients can get these plans right here from anywhere between $800 to $1,000. And over here, and I'm talking about the basics here, estate planning it's higher than this if you want more extensive planning, but typically you can get this done for about $1,000 to $1,200. I don't know about you, but that's really inexpensive, and we have a national group of attorneys that actually can provide these documents and actually have all your ducks in a row when it comes to estate plan. That way you can distribute your assets, but most importantly, preserve those assets while you're still alive. I hope you found this to be extremely important to you, because the estate planning is all about doing something. What we find more than anything with people we work with, including our own clients, sometimes they procrastinate. Do not put this stuff off, because none of us are guaranteed tomorrow, right? So we don't know whether we're going to live a long life or we may drop dead tomorrow. So hopefully this benefits you and helps you. As you're watching both Part 1 and Part 2 of Estate Planning 101, for the sake, and I'm going to make a disclaimer here. I am not an attorney, and I'm not making any kind of legal determinations when it comes to your final estate plan. I'm involved with estate planning due to the fact that every client that becomes a client of ours, we always want to make sure that they got their ducks in a row for preventive measures in the future. So I'm involved when it comes to estate plan, especially when it comes to our clients, because we always ask them, do you have a will or do you have a trust? If not, and then we will actually make sure that they take care of those issues, because I think they're extremely important. With that being said, I hope you enjoy Part 1 and Part 2.